I see that it is. They've moved things around, but hi everyone. I'm
Okay, great.
I'm Jennifer Beard, and I am in the Department of Global Health, and we're really excited to have you today for this conversation with Katie Sweeney, who is an emerging technologies librarian and education librarian at the Alumni Medical Library. And the genesis of this was when I was having conversations about the earlier workshops that we had this semester with Kristen Sheridan. We were talking about, you know, a lot of us, we're intrigued by AI, and we're intrigued by the idea of using it to help us to generate ideas, to revise, to, et cetera, et cetera. But I think a lot of us don't really have a good sense of what we're doing and what's okay. And so we thought we would ask Katie to come and have a bit of a conversation about some best practices. And I am actually going to put this into SlideShare mode. So what are we going to do today? So Katie will talk a bit about the BU Med School and BUSPH AI policies, and then some of the resources that the library has created. And one of them has this great title, Don't Do This, Do This Instead, Best Practices for AI and Writing. Oh, that is not a best practice, that's a typo. And then once Katie has done that, then we're going to take a step back and look at some examples of paragraphs that when I was reading them as part of student papers, I thought, I wonder if this was written by AI, and what to do with a paragraph like that. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So without further ado, Katie, I will stop my sharing and hand it over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much, Jen, for that wonderful introduction. Yes, hello, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for coming. My name is Katie, and I'm one of our librarians, and I'm also the Emerging Technologies librarian. And as Jen was saying, I think one of our questions around AI that we're trying to answer today is there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of promises, many of which are empty, and there's a lot of uncertainty and just questions around, especially with writing, just what can we do that's appropriate in order to save time and be a little bit more efficient, and how can we navigate that clearly in territory that's still somewhat uncharted. So the way I'm actually going to do this is with a little bit of a case study. So I have a research question that I'll give us to go over today, and then hopefully that will give us a little bit of context about how you can actually apply these things and these concepts and work through it when you're actually working on something, when you're actually doing research and writing. So let's get into it. So my case study question that I have for us is, your task is to write a paper discussing the current state of maternal mortality among women in Sierra Leone compared to other sub-Saharan African countries. So fast forwarding a little bit, we've already done our research. We've used PubMed, saving relevant sources in Zotero as we went, and we feel ready to get started writing our assignment. So if you have questions about Zotero, I'm going to be talking about it a lot today, and we can also answer questions later about it. So the first thing I'm going to do is log into Zotero and share my screen, first of all. And I'll show you the web library that I have created for this case study question. So I'm logged in, and I'm going to go to my question of maternal mortality in Sierra Leone that I've labeled over here. And I saved 9 articles on this topic into my library. If you're not sure how I did this or why, we can definitely go over that later. But this is what I've done so far. And I found all of these articles in PubMed. Um, so you feel that you should start with some basic background information on Sierra Leone more generally, but all the articles you've saved are very specific to your topic of maternal mortality. You decide you want to find some contextual information on the country to use in your introduction. So what I'm gonna do now is show you something that hopefully you've seen before, but if not, I'm happy to be showing it to you today. So this is our Alumni Medical Library homepage, and on it we have different portals for all of the schools. So I'm gonna open up the public health portal, which is the third one in this little list of the school portals. And we recently made that more easy to find, and it used to be a little bit more buried on our website, but now it's right on the homepage. Okay, so this is the public health portal, and hopefully, like I said, you've seen this before, and also hopefully you've seen the Writing Resource Center for Public Health LibGuide as well. So these are two of our LibGuides that have a lot of information on them, and I'm going to be referencing them throughout this talk. But as Jen mentioned earlier, we have this handout that we created to start answering some of the questions about best practices with AI for research and writing. So if we click on that, we'll open up the handout. So don't do this instead. So the first thing that we have is don't treat AI tools as medical databases or experts in medical knowledge. That is a common misconception that it can act in that way. And even if it's citing its sources, it really doesn't do the same thing at all. So what do you do instead? Use library resources for research, which is what we'll be doing today. Search the BU Libraries catalog or browse our A to Z database list. We have over 250 databases on that list, and there's plenty of reliable databases that your tuition dollars are paying for as well, and it's really best practice to go to those. So what's next? Don't do this. Use ChatGPT to find or write citations for your bibliographies. Um, you have all, I'm sure, heard of AI hallucinating, and this is one of the biggest cases where that is happening. AI is really, really, really bad at making citations and not changing things about them or making them up halfway through or making them up fully. So citations, you really want to avoid putting into AI, using with AI, asking AI for citations, etc. What can you do instead? You can use a reference manager like Zotero, which will save, organize, and create all of the citations that you need for you. And you don't have to worry about hallucinations. You can see all of the data in Zotero and see how it's going to create the citation before it even does that. And you can fix anything that you see is wrong. Next, don't use Google or AI to simply answer your research questions. Maybe for a very, very preliminary start, you could do that. But what you want to do is, again, library resources. Go straight to the library website that I just pulled up and refer to our research guides. So this guide that we're on right now, the Public Health Writing Resource Center, is one of our research guides. The Public Health Portal is one of our research guides, and we have guides that are wide in scope on many, many topics, provide informative and relevant resources to help you get started in many research areas. And finally, don't worry if something seems unclear, you have questions, you don't know where to start. What to do instead is just ask a librarian. We're here for you. And there are so many ways to reach out to us. You can always stop in, you can email us, or you can set up a research consultation and we can meet with you one-on-one about your question. We can go over best sources, places to start, anything that you need help with. Our email is refquest@bu.edu, and we can help you find reliable research and information. And like I mentioned with Zotero and citation managers, if you don't have it yet and you want to get set up with it, just email us. We'll make a date and we will help you get set up with that. so that you can have it create citations for you. Okay, so you see that on this sheet, it says that you can use the library catalog rather than AI tools to find resources. So we're going to go back now to the library homepage, and we're going to use the catalog. If my Wi-Fi wants to load this page. There we go. Okay, so the library catalog is front and center on the homepage of our website. So it's where it says search for articles and books in BU Library. So as I said, we want to just get some background information on the country that we're writing about. So I'm just gonna simply type in Sierra Leone and do a search. And this will pull up many, many, many results because it's finding everything in all BU libraries that mention Sierra Leone. But if we want to find specifically a book to reference, we can click books and narrow down. And here's a book called Sierra Leone from a series called Cultures of the World. So maybe I want to use this book for some background information. I can click this. And it's telling me we have online access available. So if I wanted to access the full text of this book, I could do that and go here. But let's fast forward a little bit again and say I start reading something and I find something in one of the chapters that I think would be really good to reference in my introduction of my paper. Well, just like we did in the case study with PubMed and adding articles to my Zotero library, I can also add books. So I'm going to click this little book. This is called the Zotero connector, and this will actually save it right to my Zotero library. So with the click of a button. So if I click that, over here on the right, you can see saving to maternal mortality in Sierra Leone. So now if I go back to my collection here that I have, here's the book I just saved. So now this can be cited later in my paper without any problem, and it will create an in-text citation, it will create a bibliography citation now that I have this in there. So from there, so we saved that result to our library. Now you've written your introduction. So we're fast forwarding a little bit more, paraphrasing some information you found in this book and one of the articles that you found. It introduces the concepts and provides good background information, and you're ready to move on to your first body paragraph. You're wondering how to write a smooth transition. You're wondering if an AI tool can help with this step in the process. You're not sure what your professor's specific AI policy is, so you check the syllabus for the class, and it says that the use of AI is allowed for ideation and brainstorming as long as you're not using it to do the writing for you. You want more information about using it for this purpose, and you remember the AI policy tab of the public health portal. So we're going to go back to the public health portal and go to our AI policy tab, which is under public health writing now. And you can see we have this little AI tab where I've curated some different resources that we have on this campus regarding AI. So the first is Terrier GPT. You might have heard of this, but if not, basically, if you wish to use an AI tool for your BU related work, we ask and BU asks that you please use Terrier GPT, which is a much more secure option where your data is private. It won't be training on that data, and it's just a much safer option for use on this campus than going to an open LLM. So one common misconception is that this is its own AI model. It's not. It just is a wrapper that pools many different AI models that are popular, such as Copilot, ChatGPT, and all of those different ones. So you can still choose whichever one you're most familiar with or like best. But what's great about it also is that it's not its own model, which means that it's not using a bunch of extra environmental resources and taxing the environment by having its own data center or something like that. It's just using ones that already exist. So that's Terrier GPT, and we will be doing a search in it in a moment. BUAIDA is just the governing sort of body on this campus that was developed when AI became, sort of like the next generation of AI. And one thing to note is they don't make policies. They leave policy making up to departments, professors, faculty on campus. So they encourage departments to make their own policies, and they set up trainings and talks and helpful things regarding AI, and they have a website, but they don't make policy about it. So the next thing that I want to actually go into now is the AI use policy for the MD program. So while so this says, while SPH has yet to release an official AI use policy, we encourage you to read and consider the School of Medicine's policy, as it is a very good guideline for appropriate versus inappropriate uses of these tools. This was, up to date until yesterday when I received the official SPH AI policy, which is great. However, this is still very useful and it's still very fleshed out, and I'm still going to show it to you today, but then I will also show you the official SPH policy as well, which isn't even online yet, but it is released. So the artificial intelligence policy for the med school, it starts with a definition of AI, which we don't really need. And here's a long statement about how it's important for you to learn skills on your own without relying too heavily on AI. So we've heard all this before, but this is what I want to really go over a little bit more in depth, which is the suggested health professional student uses for AI. So these are intended as it says that they're tools intended to enhance learning. And so these are some positive, appropriate uses and things like that. But mainly it's to foster creativity. So AI can help refine your own creative ideas by providing feedback and suggesting improvements, making the creative process a little bit more efficient. Students should explore tools and engage with AI to assist with brainstorming and editing. So it should always be used with vigilance and cited when used. So it also recommends using AI as a tutor, and then also use data protected AI systems. And that's where Terrier GPT comes in. So it's telling us that this is a data protected system. So just a better option if you're going to use something like that. Then it has a much longer list of when you should avoid using AI, and all of these are still relevant to folks in the other schools as well. So during times of critical thinking development, during clinical reasoning activities, during clinical practice, to ensure that patient confidentiality is maintained at all times. Never use it as a substitute for patient interaction or as a substitute to a collaboration and discussion. Or in our case, the one that's most applicable today is as a substitute for original student thought. So regarding reflection, writing, creative expression, and writing, it's not a substitute for that. And that's why when we get into our demo in a moment using Terrier GPT, the biggest recommendation and best practice that I have when it comes to writing is not to put your specific assignment into the GPT, but just to use more general questions. Use it for more general questions and then apply it to your specific assignment. And that way you won't have to resist the temptation to try to adjust and change a lot of what it's giving you, just to make it okay. And so that you're not just copying and pasting things from a GPT, but you're still getting help with writing. You're still using it like a tutor. You can still ask it questions that are more generic, and then apply that to your own, your own case. So that's what we're gonna sort of talk about in a moment. However, I do want to pull up the AI use policy for SPH, which just came out, like I mentioned. This is probably the first time you're seeing it because it's not even online yet, but it will be posted. And when it is, I will definitely add it to that same AI tab in the SPH portal so that you all have that right there as well. Um, so something to note is that these are the minimum standards required across all SPH programs, but authority is also delegated to instructors. So instructors can definitely make course level changes to this and require something stronger, but these are the minimum standards. So just a few highlights. So transparency is huge. If AI tools are used in any stage of work, brainstorming, editing, coding, data analysis, students must clearly acknowledge their use, including which tool was used and how. So transparency is sort of the biggest thing. Um, Responsibility and accountability, this just says that you're still fully responsible for the integrity of your work, whether AI contributed or not. Privacy, this is a you can't put confidential, sensitive, or personally identifiable information into the platforms. And then prohibited uses include, submitting AI generated text, analysis code, or images without attribution, which does constitute plagiarism according to this. So obviously that's pretty serious. So just don't do that. If you use AI, make sure you're transparent about it and you include an acknowledgement, a use statement, something that just says which tool you used and how, and then you won't have to worry about that too much. But again, even submitting like a full a full thing of AI generated text without changing it into your own words. You're not going to want to do that. It's not going to look good. Even if you're not plagiarizing, you probably won't get a good grade. And we want you to be learning to write, and all of those good things. So again, individual instructors have the authority to go deeper with these rules, prohibit all AI use, make changes. So the bottom line is always check with your professor. Always check the syllabus, check the specific rules for the assignment, and just double check what you need to do. But the main thing is to be transparent. So that's pretty much it for this. It's not as long as the med school's guidelines, but both would be good things to reference when you have questions. Alrighty. So we went over do this, not that, the use policy for the med school, the use policy for SPH, and just attribution of AI use is always required, and leaving this out constitutes plagiarism. That's definitely a good thing to remember. Okay, so back on the AI policy tab yes. Now the last thing I want to show you before we go into Terrier GPT and get back to our case study is really quickly this when to use Gen AI flowchart. I find this so helpful. It's not a school-wide policy or anything like that. It's just a common sense sort of flowchart that you can use to think about this. So when can we use Gen AI? So if you're here at the start, the first question to ask yourself is, does it matter if the output is true? If not, go for it. It's safe to use Gen AI. If it does matter if the output is true, the next question you have to ask is, do you have the expertise to verify that that output is true? If you don't, it's not safe to use Gen AI and you can stop right there. If you do have the expertise and you are able to tell if something sounds fishy or if it sounds good, you can move on to the next question, which is, are you able and willing to take full responsibility, legal, moral, etc., for missed inaccuracies? And again, if not, it's not safe to use Gen AI. And if you are willing to take full responsibility and you want to double check it for any inaccuracies and you want that to be part of your process, that's okay. You can move on and and it's possible to use Gen AI, but just make sure you're checking it for any inaccuracies because again, that academic statement, the SPH AI policy says that you are fully responsible regardless of the use. So that is just something to think about, but I like it as a flow chart, a way of thinking about it. Okay, so we're going to go back to our case study and we're going to go into Terrier GPT now. So I must be already logged in because it will ask you to use your BU single sign-on account and log in if you're not already. But I'm going to now enter a question to help me with writing that transition in from my introduction to my first body paragraph. So here's the question. I'm just going to paste it in so you don't have to watch me type. What are some tips for writing a smooth transition from an introduction to the first body paragraph in a public health paper? So as you can see, the most specific I'm getting is a public health paper. That context of public health, maybe that will help it. And I'm specifically asking my question about writing a smooth transition from this to this, but I'm not saying in the context of Sierra Leone, maternal mortality and et cetera, and because if I do that, it's going to give me really specific things. Then it's hard once you see that to unsee it, to not include it. And again, just don't put yourself in the position of that. Just resist the temptation to ask things that are too specific. So if I click go, you know, certainly here are some tips, and these are actually pretty good. Summarize the introduction's main idea, use transitional phrases such as these, preview the first body paragraph's focus. So give a little preview of what's coming, maintain the logical flow, keep it concise, etc. And then it will give me an example transition sentence here that could be used in this type of context. And, using this example, apply it to your situation, apply it to this paper. Maybe this is helpful as a starting point, and then you make it a little bit better, you make it a little bit nuanced, but you're still getting writing help. You're still getting some advice of a place to start. You don't have to, be scared or avoid it entirely. It's not necessarily what I'm saying, but I am saying that my best recommendation is to not get too specific because it will give you several examples of specific sentences that you could use as a transition sentence, and that might not be really good, even though they might look good. Or they might be good, but it's not really yours. And I think it's just better to avoid it. Um, all right, so you read the tips and you write something that combines these recommendations. You remember your professor saying how generic and oversimplified AI writing is, so you take care to be more specific and more nuanced than the examples were. So again, notice how I did not enter my specific topic or research question into the LLM. Once you have AI do some specific writing for you, it's harder to avoid the allure of using it. Keep your questions generic to avoid this temptation while still getting writing help. So moving on with our case study to wrap up, you continue writing your paper using Zotero for in-text citations as you go. You don't have any problems creating these citations because all of your references are already saved to your Zotero library, and citations are created with the click of a button in Word or Google Docs. At the end of your assignment, you use Zotero to automatically create then a bibliography using each citation referenced above. You also include a proper attribution statement for the AI tool you used and how it was used, even though the extent was minimal. So that's sort of my spiel. You can see how I incorporated it. I use it to help me write, but mainly I relied on other things that the library already has and sources for you. So I relied on the library catalog. I used a software like Zotero. Then I didn't have to worry about my citations or risk having AI make up some citations for me and that impacting my grade. And I relied on just other things that are, on the public health writing portal and all of those good things. So that's what I have for now. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jen to go over your examples of some AI written statements.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie. That was fantastic. I learned so much from that. And I'm excited because there are, in addition to a bunch of students and some staff people, we've also got a few professors here. So I am looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Everybody, feel free to join in this conversation. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So what I want to talk about is I have a couple paragraphs here that when I'm reading a student paper, I'm always reading it with a sense of a general and generous belief that this was something that was written by that person. I still haven't like gotten into the, I don't know, AI suspicious like kind of frame of mind. But then every once in a while I'll be reading and I'll think, wow, this doesn't sound like much. Like it sounds good. It's very smooth, but it doesn't really mean a lot. And so I like to have conversations with students when they're working on their papers about like, how do you use AI? And the conversations that we have are always really good, and I learn a lot from students about what they do. But I think that what I've heard a lot is that some students will say, I use it when I'm feeling stuck. And I think what people end up doing, and Katie, it hadn't occurred to me to be as general with prompts as you were, like give me an example of how to do this, as opposed to here's my paragraph, or here's my assignment, or here are some notes that I have, turn this into a paragraph. And so I definitely suggest sort of going in the more generic way. But then if you have asked AI to help you with writing a paragraph about something, you keep looking at this information and you can't just really boil it down. And then, I think the other thing that happens in these conversations is that students are always really good about saying, I never use it verbatim. I always change it and try to make it my own. But I think that's where the tricky part comes in. It's, as Katie said before, you can't unsee it. And I try to make it my own. And I think that's where things can be tough, because the writing actually, sort of on its face, it sounds pretty good. So here's a paragraph that I pulled in. And once again, I have no proof that this is something that was generated by AI. But I did end up writing a note in the paper to the student saying, it sounds like maybe you used AI to write this, blah, blah, blah. And sort of why that, what doesn't work about it, and all those things that we say. So here's the paragraph. Sierra Leone has significant agricultural growth potential, bolstered by targeted development initiatives. The Food and Agricultural Organization enhances productivity, supports agribusiness, and promotes climate-smart farming practices to build sustainability. Additionally, FAO's partnerships focus on strengthening social protection systems to safeguard vulnerable communities, fostering resilience and long-term economic stability within agriculture. These concerted efforts aim to transform agriculture into a driver of inclusive growth and improved food security. So basically, it's hard to sort of talk about this paragraph in some ways because I've pulled it out of a much longer paper, but it's basically part of a section of a case study where the student was looking at food insecurity in Sierra Leone. And then this was the part of the paper where they're supposed to talk about sort of assets in the country and assets in the community that that are there for people who are working from within to sort of address the problem. So this person found FAO, which isn't necessarily an inside thing, but FAO is there working in Sierra Leone. So my earlier questions were, what are the symptoms if this seems to be, if you like me think that it might be over-reliant on AI. And if you had this, how would you make it your own? How would you revise it? And I would just love to hear your thoughts. And you don't have to, you can put them in the chat, but you can also just put your hand up, or you can also just talk. Tell me what you think. And professors, you don't have to be shy either. Should I call on somebody?
So Jen, hi, it's Dan.
I did. Thank you.
Yeah. Just could you just restate what your request is? Like, this is the paragraph that you think may be AI generated.
Yeah, so I guess my questions are, what are the kind of symptoms of that? What makes if you were reading this, or if your professor was reading this, what makes this seem like it wasn't necessarily written by you, a student who's learning about this, and that it maybe, was kind of generated by a machine?
Well, I could just maybe just to start the conversation a little bit is sometimes when I read a paragraph like this, and if I have some question or concern about it, with it, particularly if there is not attribution or acknowledgement that AI was used in any way, shape, or form, sometimes the first red flag for me is there. I'm familiar with other things they've written,
Hmm.
and there's a striking contrast in terms of the use of language, syntax, everything about it. This doesn't sound like something that I know was not AI assisted.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point.
And
Um,
and when that happens, I'm actually not quite sure like how to respond because I don't have proof of anything.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and that's the thing. You don't want to accuse people of something that, because, for this one, there are actual citations here. And so, with the conversation that I want to have with this student is not, did you use AI, in a wrong way, but how can you maybe use it? If you used it, how could you use
If
it better? And, I think the thing for me, well, actually, I want to see if anybody else has thoughts about the symptoms here, like just what about it, when if you were reading this in a paper, that just would maybe catch your attention and make you think, huh, I don't know about this.
I have one idea.
Okay.
Um, I I don't know about other people, but when I write, I don't usually have all medium length sentences. I usually have sentences that are a little bit more varied than this. Some are shorter and some are longer. But the flow of this is so uniform. And again, without the substance really being substantive. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, so I'll tell you guys what I was thinking when once I read this. And I read it, sort of as part of the section, and just kept going. Didn't think much about it. And then I went back and started looking at, all the paragraphs a little bit more closely, and I was like, okay, so Sierra Leone has this FAO program,
Mhm.
but what this sounds like to me more than anything is like kind of marketing speak, at best. That it's, kind of like at the very surface level, what is FAO offering or able to do in Sierra Leone? And once again, this is only a paragraph, but it if you don't go on, and this is the only paragraph that talks about this. So, in and of itself, maybe as an introduction to a section that then goes into a lot of detail about the different aspects of the program, maybe it wouldn't have caught my attention, but it caught my attention because it's sort of a standalone paragraph about this. But I still don't feel like I can tell you anything about who the FAO is, what they're doing in Sierra Leone, how it's applying specifically. So if I happened to generate this paragraph, and I go back to what Katie said before, is that, I love that flow chart of, how you make decisions about what to use. And the whole idea that you're better off if you haven't asked AI to write this in the first place, that you've written it yourself. But if you have it and you want to make use of it, what you really need to do is you need to break it down, and you need to sort of say, for each sentence, what is it saying? What are some details that I can work in here? How can I give this some of my own voice? So the FAO enhances productivity, supports agribusiness, promotes climate smart farming practices. I mean, each one of those things in the list could be a sentence in and of itself that says, a follow-on sentence that says, in terms of productivity, it does X. And then there's another citation, and then in terms of agribusiness, I don't even know what agribusiness is. It explains like what agribusiness is, and promotes. So it's got a lot of buzzwords, but it doesn't have a lot of substance. So that's kind of what I tend to sort of think about and notice when I'm reading. And I'll move on to the next one. So just if you find yourself in this situation where you do have text that, you asked Terrier GPT to help you write because you're just like, what is this assets? And, I feel like my brain has just stopped. So I want it to give me some ideas. And so it spits this out at you. And that's fine. But the thing is that it should give you ideas, but it shouldn't be something you put directly into your paper. And then if you are using parts of it or sentences, you want to make sure that you're adding the detail. And I think that one of the things that I feel like I've personally noticed as somebody who reads a lot of papers over the last few years is that I feel like more and more student papers sound really good, but don't have as much substance. Whereas before ChatGPT came along, papers were full of all kinds of information. Sometimes it was random information. It didn't necessarily belong, but it was, and maybe the organization was kind of all over the place, but they were filled with thinking and information. And I think that's the gap, is that now it sort of feels more like they sound really good, but they don't, there's not a whole lot of there. So here's just another example. This is from a different paper. And once again, this is a very short paper, so it was just 1,500 words. And the person was looking into, the whole point of the paper was to describe the extent of child marriage in Bangladesh and social historical determinants and impact. So that's like the overall kind of like paper. But this is the background section. Or it's the beginning of the background section. And so we get child marriage in Bangladesh is a critical issue with severe consequences for adolescent girls. The practice significantly increases the risk of maternal and neonatal mortality, intimate partner violence, educational deprivation, trapping them in a cycle of poverty and poor health outcomes. Those from rural areas or economically disadvantaged families are disproportionately affected by this practice. In such areas, cultural norms and economic factors make child marriage a viable solution for families struggling with financial insecurity. Additionally, studies increasingly link climate change to the rise in child marriages, with environmental crises intensifying economic hardship. So I'll ask you the same questions if somebody else would like to jump in. And I really would welcome a student jumping in and just saying, what are some signs maybe that this was written by AI? And what would you do about it? And I think as I was reading it, the other thing that I was just thinking was, even if you did write this yourself, um, it's still, the fundamental problem here is not necessarily that it was written by ChatGPT. I mean, that's not great, but it's the fact that the writing is sort of empty. And so if you're able to write a really slick paragraph like this, that sounds good once again, but doesn't have a lot of kind of detailed information or nuance, then how do you go back into your own writing and start weaving in details? But I would love to hear thoughts from anybody who might want to share your thinking. If you had written this paragraph, or ChatGPT had offered it to you when you were doing some brainstorming, how would you make it your own?
So I just wanted to add that it's almost like they seem like an outline of a paper that is written in paragraph form.
Yeah.
And so I think this is just maybe along the lines of what others have said so far, but that filling that out more, right? Like so almost using it as an outline and then elaborating on each of those sections, like, because it just feels like it is very polished and smooth. And yes, that is great in scientific writing and things like that, but it's also, people don't talk like that, like people. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, because it wasn't until this very moment when I was reading it out loud and I was like, oh, there's a pattern here of lists. Because the other one had that list too. This one has several lists of, that this in and of itself could be an entire paper. But it ended up being just, it ended up being just the paragraph. So, it ended up being the section or a substantive part of the section. So if I were trying to fill this in, I think I love the idea of thinking of it as an outline. And maybe instead of, when you're trying to get ChatGPT to help you out with your kind of thinking and planning, asking it to help you with a basic sort of starter outline, and then, but in a general kind of way, and then you fill in the details. Because I think one of the things from this paper and a bunch of others in this class in particular was, I was just like, there's no, I think that in the past I've often had to sort of say to students in my feedback, you've got really great data here. You've got so much good information, but it's like you've got too much information. It's overwhelming. There are too many numbers. And here there are none. And there's that whole idea of filling in, like telling us about, the risks of neonatal and maternal mortality, about intimate partner violence, about educational deprivation. Like, what does that mean? So great. Thank you, Krista. That was a really great thing to notice.
I would just, if I could just add one other thing to it. I think, Krista, your point is, your observation seems so spot on with this. But one of the things that I would also be concerned with is, like, several of the sentences they're declarative. It's almost this is all the knowledge, it's right here. And so I think what I would do immediately, the red flag in this moment would be, check out these citations.
Yeah.
I mean, like these are like meta analyses or something. There's because it's so comprehensive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That it basically is packing so much in here, and there are citations, but there are only 3 citations, and yeah, so it's so my hope is that for those of you who maybe have used it to generate ideas and have ended up with a paragraph like this, And then you think, you know what, I can't rewrite that in a way. That sounds really good. Who am I? I'm just a student. I don't know how to improve on this. And the thing is that anything you do to it will improve on it. And any information that you weave in will, as soon as you break this up into chunks and you start kind of telling us what these different pieces and things mean and working in more information and more citations, you're suddenly making it your own. And so if you come away with sort of one thing from looking at these examples today, I hope it's that sense of, okay, that sounds good, it looks good, but it actually isn't all that good, and I can make it better. It's just an empty wrapper, um, as Katie used that terminology for Terrier GPT. But yeah, Jen, you have your hand up. Jennifer.
Thanks, Jen. So as an instructor, so two things. This project that you're talking about is part of ICPH, and so for instance, I would see that citation format and go, that's not right. That is not AMA. First of all. Second of all, someone made the comment about, going to look at the references. Guess what I do as an instructor? When I see something, I'm like, that makes me go, I look at the references. And, and we know that we know that AI hallucinates the references, have caught it that way, or that sort of they're reference adjacent, where the journal exists and the author writes on these topics, researches these topics, but the paper doesn't actually exist. So those are things that catch my eye. I mean, other than absolutely positively, there's no depth here. There's no there's no depth to this. But so, the analysis itself could be substantially better, but those are some of the things that are dead giveaways that this was not generated by a human.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So we have a few minutes. We don't have as much time for questions as we had hoped, but we do have some time. We have 6 minutes. So if anybody has questions for Katie or me or the professors who are here, or just observations about what we've talked about, we would love to hear from you. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see everyone. So I can sit out the uncomfortable silence and just wait, or I can maybe call in some people and just ask you about your thoughts about today, what you learned, and how maybe you're using it. Oh, but Lori, thank you so much for jumping in.
Hi. I just kind of wanted to know what AI was because I'm a returning student after like 20 years. And my kids and my husband were talking about it, and I was like, is everybody using this? And I'm not, and I need to know what it is. So that was just kind of why I wanted to come.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So great question. That's totally fair. So AI is a broader category that includes a lot of different things. So there's like machine learning and AI and Gen AI and all these different things. But I think what we've been talking about today, mainly with like ChatGPT and through Terrier GPT and all of those different things, that's a category more specific called generative AI. And so artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. What's new is generative AI. So generative AI is the stuff that we're looking at like this, that can just, you give it something and it spits out all of this information. It can do somewhat sophisticated writing, or what passes to some people as sophisticated writing. And that didn't used to exist like just a few years ago. But basically, artificial intelligence more broadly has been doing things for you for a very long time. Like when you're writing an email and it suggests the rest of the word and it just says, do you want to say this? And you click enter and it fills it in. That's artificial intelligence. But that didn't spook anyone, because it didn't then write the rest of your paragraph, the rest of your email, cite sources, and send it for you. Those are all new things that are out now. And so that's why it's changed like the learning landscape so drastically and so much in such a short time, because students and people who even just like write professionally can sort of rely too heavily on it. So that's what we were trying to get at today. I hope that clears some things up, but it's a big question. And you know, AI has so many harmless, like nice use cases that have been in our lives for a long time, like when, you know, Spotify recommends the next song and it becomes your next favorite song. But that's different from generative AI and the things that it can do nowadays. Do you want to add anything to that, Jen?
I was just going to say that I wonder sometimes if students in particular, especially maybe if you're new to graduate school, feel like, okay, there's this tool and I should be using it because, you know, once again, you know, you have all these kind of concerns about, you know, do I belong here? Am I smart enough? Can I do it? And, you know, here's AI and AI does it well. And how can I do it better than AI? And the thing is that, you know, writing in particular is a slow and lonely process that can often be quite frustrating. And the thing is that frustration, you know, you kind of have to work through that frustration. And I think sometimes the idea is, you know, people get frustrated and then they turn to AI and they just say, I'm going to let it write this for me. And I don't let it write anything for me, even emails, because I feel like I need to be fully engaged. And so, you know, I would say, Lori, you know, to explore it, but don't feel like you have to use it either, you know.
Definitely
And I
don't
think
feel pressure to use
especially
it.
the whole idea of I would never use it to generate text for me unless I was asking it to come up with like examples for a workshop, which I did not do it for this. These were actual real examples from papers that I've read. But, you know, I've played around with it a bit, but, you know, I think that there's that fine middle ground between being maybe a Luddite like me who you know, just wants to avoid it, and somebody who says, you know, this is a great tool. This could really help me, you know, because when I come up with, I start free writing or you know, I'm a very verbose writer and my papers are always 500 words too long. You know, maybe it can help me cut out some of those extra words. You know, it's a useful tool in that way. But Janet, are you still here? You have this interesting question. I wonder if there was a similar concern with the development of the calculator. Do you want to say any more about that?
No, I mean, I guess the basis is just skills degradation, right? Is that what we're all worried about?
One thing, that's just one of the concerns. But yeah, that there was definitely a similar concern, and you can find articles about that actually with the calculator. But there's a lot of differences. So I think the major thing that sticks out in my mind is that calculators don't hallucinate. They don't make up numbers or different answers. So they're very, very reproducible. And whereas generative AI is like the common phrase is that it's a black box. Like even the people who create these tools don't know where the sources are always coming from, and they're not reproducible. So you could ask it the same question tomorrow that you asked it today, and it will give you slightly different answer with slightly different sources, and it might hallucinate tomorrow and it might not today. So it's very different from a calculator in that way.
That's a great answer, Katie. Jennifer.
Yeah, along those lines, I was very specifically asked, we have an AI policy in PH 720. And it's not prohibitive, but that there's needs to be ethical use of AI. And I had a student, after I discussed this in our first class, I had a student come up to me and he said, what's the difference between me, searching for these articles and coming up with, or searching for this information and coming up with a synopsis versus AI doing it? And at first, I didn't know the answer. But here's the answer. It's that AI has no ability to vet the information. It cannot vet the quality of the sources. It cannot vet conflict of interest. It is simply generating statements based on what it sees the most, is the way I understand it. So let's say the chemical, I'm a toxicologist. Let's say the chemical industry floods the system with chemicals are good, they don't hurt you. Well, if AI sees that the most, that's what it's going to spit back to you. And you have, and it has no, it's not, it doesn't look for conflict of interest. It doesn't look at the impact factor of that journal. It doesn't see whether it's a pay to play source. So that was my answer, that you have to bring the human component of vetting not only the quality of the data, but the quality of the sources of the data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great, Jennifer. Thank you. And Katie, I had never thought of it this way before, but in science, we're all about, your findings need to be reproducible.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't from one day to the next sort of predict what you're getting, then that's a symptom of it's maybe a useful tool, but not to be trusted. But thank you so much, Katie. And thank you to all of you for being here. And I will make sure to get this recording out broadly to core course instructors and other people so that you can refer to